Hello AMP1 students, this is Lisa Reed. We're going to try a little bit different of a format for these videos. We're going to try the organelle lecture one more time. Instead of doing PowerPoints with the narration on top, I'm going to try just a video. I'm also going to make them in a little bit shorter of segments, so that way if they're not working, I can fix it quicker. And also that way if there's just a certain spot that you know you need to go to, it's going to be easier for you. For now, I'm going to list these in Blackboard, but I may also look at doing a YouTube channel as well. So here we go with organelles of the cell. So we're going to look at organelles. Those are the little cellular structures. They each have an individual job. So kind of like organs in your body, they work together. Organelles in the cell, they each have their individual job or task, but they're going to work together for whatever the cell's goal is. Normally we're going to be talking about making some kind of protein, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. And those organelles are kind of settled in a little jelly-like material, and this says it's called the cytosol, but to be honest, most of us just call it the cytoplasm. Now technically the cytoplasm includes the organelles and the cytosol, but in lots of resources you'll just hear the kind of jelly-like material is just called the cytoplasm. So that's the word I'm going to use instead of cytosol. Some of these organelles have membranes. They're membrane bound, just like the cell itself, and then other organelles aren't. I'm not going to be so picky about which ones are and which ones aren't. To be honest, you'll be able to see that when you look at a picture of the cell and the organelle. Those that have kind of an outline of a line, you can tell that that's a membrane bound organelle. Sometimes pictures of the cell will show the cytoskeleton, but not always. The cytoskeleton is made of filaments of protein, usually called microfilaments or microtubules. And the cytoskeleton is shown sometimes on pictures kind of like little sticks. They almost look like little chopsticks, but they help give the cell its shape. And then there's going to be certain cytoskeleton parts that we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail. But it's on some pictures, but not always. But if you see it, it looks like little chopsticks, and it's just filaments of protein to help give the cell its structure. Inclusions are not too important to me, so I'm going to skip over them. Sometimes you'll see a little fat droplet or something that you can't really tell what it is. That's probably an inclusion. But an inclusion sometimes just means something that the cell kind of takes in or is storing. So we may see inclusions when we talk more about, or when we link together with endo and exocytosis. Okay, the first organelle, of course, on our list is the nucleus. It is the largest organelle. Most cells have only one, but some cells have more than one, which would be multinucleate, and some cells don't have any, so they were called anuclear or anucleate. The nucleus does have kind of its own jelly-like material in the inside of the nucleus. That's called the nucleoplasm. Also inside are our DNA. Our DNA is wrapped around proteins, and when it's wrapped around proteins, we call it chromatin. It looks like a jumble of spaghetti. It kind of looks like a big ball of yarn, if you will, and that is what we call it most of the time, is chromatin. Now, when we get to cell division, we'll start using the term chromosomes, but for now, if a cell's just sitting there, inside the nucleus is chromatin. Sometimes you can also see a dark mass inside the nucleus, and that's the nucleolus. That organelle does have a special function. That is where the ribosomes are made, and the ribosomes are going to become very important here and very soon. So they are produced in the nucleolus. Around the nucleus is a nuclear membrane, or it's sometimes called a nuclear envelope. But basically, the circle around the nucleus is a membrane, and it also has little holes. So those are called nuclear pores. And we're going to talk later about what can go in and out of the nucleus, and so it is important to know that there are these little holes on that membrane for substances to go through. It's a little bit different than the cell membrane. There's actually little holes for substances to go out. That is a picture of the nucleus. Now it looks like that's a whole picture of the cell on the left, but that is just the nucleus, and then that darker spot on the inside is the nucleolus. On the right is a zoomed in version of a picture of the nuclear membrane, and so you can see those little dots on the outside, and those are those pores. Next organelle that we're going to talk about is the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum kind of looks like, to me, a maze. Some scientists call it a highway. I'm not sure that I love that term, but it does to me look like a maze. It looks like some little passageways, if you will, and then they have these little kind of adjoining passageways. We'll see a picture here in just a minute. There's two types of endoplasmic reticulum, and the rough ER has those parallel sacs, that little maze-like structure that I talked about, and they also have ribosomes on the outside. So they have dots on the outside. Those are ribosomes, and we'll talk about what the ribosomes do shortly. Normally the endoplasmic reticulum is right outside of the nucleus. And so there's a reason it's right there. We'll get to that. The job of the endoplasmic reticulum is to synthesize proteins. Now, synthesize is a very fancy way of saying they make proteins. And we're going to talk about the cell making proteins and what organelles are involved in that process. But the ER is a big part of the protein making process. Okay, the other type of ER is called the smooth ER. It does not have any ribosomes on the outside, so it looks smooth. I'm not picky that you know the difference between the function of the ERs, but you should be able to tell them apart looking at them, and we'll see a picture here. So the smooth ER is on the right. It does not have any ribosomes, and then the rough ER is on the left with all those dots. Those are all ribosomes. And that's kind of the side view, so it kind of looks a little maze-like to me. There's lots of parallel lines, but then if you look, there's usually some that cross perpendicularly, kind of like in a maze. Okay, ribosomes, those little dots on the ER, are little granules of protein and RNA. And we're going to talk about their function later when we get to DNA and RNA. But the short version of that is that they basically read the information coming from the nucleus. So they read the information from the DNA, and they are what allows the cell to make a protein. They are essential in every single cell in all living things. So their job is extremely important. That is where the actual protein is being made, is at the ribosome. That's a horrible picture, I'm sorry. Okay, next is the Golgi complex. It's usually, in my words, it's usually called the Golgi apparatus. It is a small little organelle that looks like flattened pancakes. Now, you are going to probably say that the ER looked like pancakes. I understand. The Golgi does too, just a little bit more pancake-like. And there's little flat membranes, don't have any perpendicular rows. So they're all just parallel to each other. And they're usually closer to the cell membrane, what you're looking at in the cell. And the Golgi apparatus, this is kind of a long-winded explanation here, but the Golgi apparatus basically does the finishing touches of the proteins. So when the proteins are done being made, they go to the Golgi. The Golgi sorts them, puts some finishing touches on them, and then packages them if they are leaving the cell. And they are packaged in vesicles. So if they are leaving the cell, they get put in a vesicle at the Golgi complex. And here's a little picture, and those little bubbles are the vesicles, and then those flattened semicircles is the Golgi itself. It's a pretty long, wide one, but flattened pancakes, not always so curved as that one is, but that's the Golgi. Lysosome are little organelles that may or may not be visible in the picture that you're looking at, but they are little membrane-bound organelles that have enzymes inside. Usually they look like a little ball, a little sphere, but their job is to kind of help clean up the cell. So sometimes they're called the garbage disposal, sometimes they're called the cleanup crew, but when there are maybe proteins that aren't used anymore, or other parts of the cell, other organelles that the cell doesn't need anymore, the lysosomes, as enzymes, break apart whatever that is and kind of clean it up and get rid of it in the cell. I'm going to skip over peroxisomes. I don't really think that they're too important, and we've got plenty of other organelles to focus on. Okay, I'm going to pause here and leave this video where it is and pick up in a next video.